everyone. On behalf of our executive team and the entire New York City Police Department, thank you for being here. I'm joined today by First Deputy Commissioner Eddie Caban, Chief of Department Ken Corey, Chief of Detectives James Essig, Chief of Patrol Jeff Madry, Chief of Transit Jason Wilcox, and Chief of Crime Control Strategies Michael LePetri. We're here to update you on some key crime-fighting initiatives and violence reduction strategies as we enter the final 3 months of this year. We'll also review overall crime data for this past quarter, as well as for September 2022 compared to September of last year. We will not take our foot off the gas. We will continue to employ effective strategies to suppress violence, interdict and seize illegal guns, and address all other crime categories. These are not just words. We have taken steps and action to stop the victimization of New Yorkers and visitors. We know, of course, that one victim is too many, and we remain committed to doing our part to hold criminals fully accountable for their actions. Citywide, the number of shooting incidents are down more than 13% when comparing September of this year to September of last year. Murders, too, are down by 23.5% when looking at September versus September. Murders and shootings are also down 12.6% year-to-date. At the same time, overall arrests for index crime citywide are at a 21-year high year-to-date, going back to 2001. Meanwhile, arrests, specifically for illegal gun possession, are up September over September by nearly 7.5%, and our gun arrests are at a 27-year high. NYPD officers so far this year have taken more than 5,600 illegal guns off the streets of New York. This is real, tangible progress in our fight against the scourge of illegal guns in our city. It's directly driven by the dedication and efforts of our officers in uniform, in our investigations, our civilian analysts, and more. We know there is always more work to do to make the city safer, further innovations to employ, and new crime strategies to institute. We must prevent and deter criminal activity. We work alongside other city agencies to combat crime and correct disorder. From poor lighting and graffiti to increased officer visibility, riding the trains and on foot in our communities, coordinated takedown operations, vehicle and traffic law enforcement, and that list is by no means exhaustive. And we're always striving to improve because New Yorkers demand it of us just as we do of ourselves. In a moment, you'll hear from Chief Corey, who will outline some more of our measures that we'll be implementing during the next few months to continue and enhance the encouraging progress that's been made. We focus on the drivers of crime and the new and creative ways to combat them. From reporting methods to investigative work to building strong prosecutions. Nearly 40% of all major crime in New York City is grand larcenies. Part of this is attributable to the internet and phone-based scams. These criminals make contact, often under the guise of being government agents, debt collectors, utility service employees, bank tellers, or reps from retail companies or dating applications. They claim to need money from the victim urgently and in confidence. These scams can be initiated by phone calls, text messages, emails, or even in person. In response, the NYPD launched a scam awareness campaign this week to educate anyone who may fall victim to such scams. A 24-hour information hotline was set up to help New Yorkers inquire about and better understand many of these old or emerging crime schemes. This messaging effort is about awareness and ultimately about prevention. The line is staffed by NYPD personnel who can guide callers in a way that best serves their individual needs. Before sending anyone money, people can thwart these scams by first checking directly with their family members, their banks, or the companies with whom they do business. Education is just one of the ways New Yorkers can share this responsibility for public safety. So please help us get the word out. Chief Corey will discuss in detail our end-of-year crime strategy. This strategy will also address chronic issues that we see each year during the holiday season. We will leverage technology and joint agency operations, as well as reallocating patrol and investigative resources to high crime and hotspot areas to keep New York safe and drive crime down. We will continue to pursue, apprehend, and seek to hold accountable opportunists and recidivists who prey on the people of this city. The women and men of the NYPD are absolutely tireless in these efforts, and we will continue to face our challenges head-on with effective tactics, accurate intelligence, community engagement, and relentless follow-up. Chief Corey.
All right, good morning, everybody. Thank you all for coming. You know, as the Commissioner indicated, a big part of the majority crime in New York City is grand larceny, right? It accounts for 40% of all the crime. It also accounts for nearly half of the increase in crime this year is caused by grand larceny. Now, there are several ways to commit grand larceny, but the most common one is the theft of property valued at more than $1,000. She also indicated how arrests for index crimes are at a 2001 level, or at a level not seen since 2001. And while Chief LaPetri will get into some of the crime specifics in a few moments, I'd also like to add on to that in 2001 we had 9,000 more police officers on the street than we do today. Right, so we have 9,000 fewer officers making the same number of high-quality arrests as were made 21 years ago. Arrests are up in every major crime category, including grand larceny. And so while we have made measurable, sustained progress in combating the increase in crime, the question that came, Tony, I think you asked last month, is why haven't the arrests had the impact on crime that we would expect? And the answer, quite simply, particularly where grand larceny is concerned, is rampant recidivist behavior. So much like when we speak about shooting violence and we say that there are a small number of people that drive the majority of gun violence in this city, there are a small number of people who drive most other crimes in this city as well. As an example, the 19th precinct on the Upper East Side of Manhattan, where grand larcenies have been spiking and now account for 70% of all the crime that occurs in the 19th precinct. There are 43 individuals, none of whom live in the 19th precinct. 43 individuals who have been arrested in the 19th precinct, a combined total of 438 times in 2022 alone. Those same individuals have been arrested 1,027 times citywide this year. So as our officers and our detectives go out every day and do their jobs, and as all of you are sitting here right now doing your jobs, these people are out there right now, these 43 people, doing their job. And their job is to steal, and to steal as much as they can and as often as they can. And the reason that they're able to do that is because right now, the only consequence that they face is spending a couple of hours in a police station, a minor inconvenience, and then they are immediately re-released and go on to steal again. That is what drives the crime increase. And again, when Chief LaPetri speaks, he'll get into similar data involving robberies, involving auto theft, all driven by this recidivist behavior. So what's the plan to combat it, as the Commissioner said, as we go into the fourth quarter of the year and our plans to combat shooting violence and homicide, we've seen great success from, still much work to be done, but all still moving in the right direction. We take that supplemental deployment, those 650 officers that we deploy every day from non-enforcement functions that we've been putting out since February, and now we're going to start to shift some of those into the areas where we see other crime spiking. So we're going to deploy it when we need it and where we need it. And we are initially targeting 20 commands that are driving a large majority of the increase in crime. And many of these commands are very different from the places where we saw violence spiking. So right now, the number one precinct in crime increase in the city is the 109, covering Flushing, College Point, and Whitestone. So they will be getting these resources in addition to others to help combat that crime. We're moving our citywide traffic task force to commands that are spiking in property crime. And we're also using them to cover the bridges between the Manhattan and the Bronx to combat some of the robbery patterns that we see. Teenagers on scooters doing muggings, going back and forth between northern Manhattan and the Bronx. We're sending our co-response teams to focus on areas that have concentrations of people in need of services and where we also overlay increases in crime. We're not just playing defense here anymore. We're going to start visiting our recidivists at home. We're going to knock on their doors, sometimes with probation, sometimes with parole if either of those apply, but other times just local precinct officers, NCOs, public safety team officers, knocking on the doors. We know who you are. We know where you live. Our field training units, we changed the way that we use our field training units, or the way our officers experience field training, a couple of months ago. And what we've done, and we have a class, this is significant for the plan because we have a class of officers graduating on October 17th. And we expect to graduate about 700 officers out of that class. They are all being assigned to foot patrol in commercial areas, along commercial strips. So think Fordham Road in the Bronx, think Broadway in Manhattan, think 86th Street in Brooklyn, think Jamaica Avenue in Queens, New Dorp Lane in Staten Island, and so on. They will be out there on the day shift and the 4 to 12 shift 7 days a week. When that class graduates, that cadre of officers, who will all be closely supervised and trained by a hand-selected supervisor and a hand-selected field training officer. They will be out there 7 days a week during those shifts along those streets. And in the evening hours, once the majority of those stores have closed, 7, 8 o'clock at night, rather than have the officer standing in front of rolled-down store gates, they will be shifted over to nightlife areas, to the areas where the restaurants, bars, and so on are. Make no mistake, they are not out there as scarecrows. They are out there to enforce the law and to address quality of life conditions that exist along those posts that they have. In our transit system, those new officers get assigned to the subway training unit. So again, working with hand-selected supervisors and field training officers, all of those officers are assigned to the 4 p.m. to midnight shift, adding dozens of extra officers throughout the evening rush and into the late evening hours as people are returning home from work and hopefully their nightlife activities. Those officers do long multi-borough, multi-district train runs and station patrols. And in our housing bureau, those officers are assigned to foot patrol in multiple housing developments being moved by the housing bureau as crime conditions dictate. We have returned over 200 officers to patrol so far this year from administrative positions or so-called desk jobs. That number continues to increase both as we find efficiencies and as we are able to hire up civilian replacements, and we fully expect to return an additional 50 officers to patrol before the end of this month as civilian replacements are hired for them. We're returning to street narcotics enforcement in many areas where we see that narcotics offenses drive the crime. So there will be new investigative enforcement teams initially deployed to 4 high street crime corridors in the Bronx, Queens North, Brooklyn, and Midtown Manhattan. We are adding investigators to our detective squads and our robbery squads to more quickly identify offenders, and to our warrant squads so that we can more rapidly apprehend them, prioritizing the small number of recidivists who are driving the majority of crime. We are strategically deploying cameras, license plate readers, and other technologies throughout these zones. We are working with an interagency task force targeting quality of life conditions in these targeted precincts, and as always, all of our officers will be out there engaging with the community. I'm going to hand it off to Chief Wilcox to talk a little bit about our subway and transit system.
Thank you, Chief. Good morning, everybody. As we've spoken about extensively over the past 9 months, the Mayor, the NYPD, and the MTA implemented a subway safety plan at the start of this year. The mission then and now is to confront the many challenges that we face in the subways, including crime, quality of life, and homelessness. We fully understand that perception can sometimes influence behavior just as much as reality can. So as the Commissioner said, we remain committed to ensuring that our public transit riders are not only safe, but that they feel safe too. So we put more uniformed officers in parts of the system that need them the most, and worked on focusing our resources and making our patrols more efficient. And one major component of this plan, which is centered on this premise, is proactivity. That means being out there on patrol and highly visible in the stations, on the platforms, and definitely on the trains. And that's exactly what we're doing. So far, in 2022, NYPD officers have been on more than nearly 270,000 train runs and done more than 113,000 platform sweeps. And in the first 9 months of this year, officers have conducted nearly 750,000 transit station inspections system-wide. That's a 106% increase from 2021. We brought back targeted train patrols crossing between boroughs during the overnight hours. We call it TPF, or Train Patrol Force, an operation that we're expanding this month. And in support of these initiatives, the Police Commissioner has partnered with the MTA to record audio announcements that will air every 15 minutes at 400 subway stations throughout the system. These announcements, focused on transit safety and best practices, will be running through the end of October. But it's not just an increased presence that impacts public safety. It's the vital work that our officers are doing every day throughout the entire system to address the issues that we are facing and that our riders are facing. Arrests in transit have gone up nearly 50% compared to last year, with significant increases in every offense classification. One arrest area of particular note when you consider the recent violence we have experienced in just the past several days involving cutting instruments. This year, we have made over 600 arrests for illegal cutting instruments, a 95% increase. And we have issued 220 summonses for unlawful weapons, a 255% increase. When any serious crime occurs in the subways, our response is swift and decisive. The investigations into these incidents by our detectives is immediate and thorough. We've also doubled our fare evasion arrests from last year and written more than 33% more fare evasion summonses. And our quality of life summons enforcement, addressing drinking, smoking, lying down, or being outstretched in the subway trains, taking up multiple train seats, etc., is up by 165% from 2021. So we are out there on patrol, and our cops are active, but not just when it comes to enforcement. We continue to work in a continuous and collaborative partnership with several other city agencies to address the very complex issue of homelessness on the trains, in the transit hubs, and at end-of-line stations. The goal is always to connect people to services that they need, to keep them healthy, to keep them safe. That's why, in partnership with the Department of Homeless Services and the Department of Health, we've been going out every night since February to do this critical outreach. And this year, our NYPD officers riding the trains with these joint response teams and working directly with them at end-of-the-line stations have made more than 33,000 homeless contacts in our subway system. And they facilitated shelter or healthcare services for almost 4,000 persons. As riders return to our system after the past 2 years, we know it's absolutely essential that our public transit be safe. That's our job, and the members of the NYPD take great pride in the work that they do. from our patrol officers to our top line executives. Each part of our team is determined to be there for our riders, and we will never waver in our commitment to keep every station, every platform, and every subway train safe. Thank you. I'm now going to turn this over to for remarks by Chief of Crime Control Strategies, Michael LaPetri.
Good morning. So just to build on the increase in 7 major arrests and the increase in gun arrests in New York City, we usually talk about going back 20-something years to see the similar amount of gun arrests, 20-something years for the similar amount of 7 major arrests. But what's important to note is during those times, we had almost 50% more index crimes. So we are arresting at about a 35% arrest ratio to index crimes. Back then, it was just a little bit more than a quarter. So the NYPD is very proud of the precision policing model. And obviously, I think that this data shows that. And then when you look at gun arrests compared to approximately 25 years ago, you're talking about almost 50% less shooting violence the city sees now than it did 25 years ago. So again, it's the precision policing model. Chief Corey talked about grand larceny, driving, our index crimes. The next crime that is also driving index crimes are robberies. So I'd like just to talk a little bit about robberies, on what we're seeing, and who we're arresting. 42% of our robbery incidents for the quarter involve multi-perps acting in concert. That is up substantially from last year. And I say that because it is important to note that when you have 3, 4, 5, 6 perpetrators committing a robbery, it does make it more difficult to arrest all those perpetrators at that time. It also makes it more difficult for the Detective Bureau to investigate those robberies with multi-perpetrators involved. So what we've seen is, though we have arrests in about 35% of our robberies this year, we see some of these perpetrators then splintering off to commit many, many more robberies, not just across a precinct, not just across a geographic borough, but across the city. They use vehicles a lot of times with plates that we had already seized, that then were forged or photocopied. They've used scooters and bikes, which make it very difficult to be apprehended. They are usually masked up, and we have seen an increase in gunpoint robberies. So who is my robber in New York City today? 16% of our robbery arrests are of individuals under the age of 18. We have almost a 50% increase from 5 years ago with individuals arrested for 3 or more robberies in 1 year. A 50% increase from 2018. I'm sure some of you say, well, why do you go back to 2018? Well, we know the change in the law happened in 2020. But for the last half of 2019, the courts enacted, basically, the 2020 change of the laws. So I talked about 16% of our robbery arrests are under the age of 18. I'd like to just go to some of the same data or age group when it comes to violence in New York City and gun arrests. So unfortunately, 10% of our shooting victims this year are under the age of 18. 13% of our shooting arrests, this does not include wanted people, are under the age of 18. There's going to be a chart that comes up over my shoulder. And what that chart shows is you get arrested with a gun in New York City, and then you go on to commit a shooting in New York City. 15% of juveniles under the age of 18 who get arrested with a gun go on to commit a shooting in some way in New York City. 15%. When you look at the other age categories, 18 to 24, it's 6%. And then it goes down to 25 to 40, 3%. Something's not working. Something's not working when it comes to, unfortunately, dealing with violent individuals under the age of 18. And we're talking about violence here and recidivism. Chief Corey touched retail theft. Shoplifting crime in New York City is at its highest levels. We're up almost 18,000 shoplifting complaints. And that includes petty larceny, grand larceny, and robberies that start as a shoplifting, but then violence is connected to it. So as I was looking at the recidivists across the city of New York who continue to prey on innocent New Yorkers, I came across an individual that myself, Chief Corey, we've spoken about him plenty of times at CompStat. I have personally spoken to plenty of times, and commanding officer in my office has spoken to the DA's office in regards to this individual. So I'm going to give you a little bit of data behind this prolific shoplifter. He has 40 arrests alone from 2020. He has 31 arrests this year. They are all shoplifting arrests. So where does he target? He targets the first precinct. 29 out of his 31 arrests occur in the first precinct. And like Chief Corey's statistics about the 19th precinct, this individual does not live in the first precinct. He is a 2-time convicted felon, and he's a predicate. He also has 15 misdemeanor convictions. He has failed to report to court approximately 30 times. 30 times. A complete mockery of the system. He gets arrested in August for a pattern within the first precinct. Keep in mind, the first precinct is up 1,500 shoplifting victims' complaints this year. 1,500, with almost 3,000 complaints. He gets arrested for a pattern in August of this year. He gets arrested for 18 petty larcenies or grand larcenies. I gave you his bench warrant history. The arrest in August was bail eligible because of his open cases, which was a new CPL 530 that came into effect with the tweak of bail reform. He walked out of the door with no bail. And what did he do? He just got arrested this week for 10 additional grand larcenies and penny larcenies at stores that are all too familiar, pharmacies, that continue to get preyed on across the city, and guess what? Continue to get closed at alarming rates. Finally, this individual is now in on a bail. When we talk about shoplifting, we mean it. We have arrested individuals at some of the highest levels, but unfortunately, when it comes to the specific crime, even when it can be bail eligible and is requested by the DA, the judges let these individuals go out and prey on New Yorkers again. Thank you very much.
Good morning, everybody. Chief Essick, Chief of Detectives. Before I get into some of the case updates, I'd like to ask for the public's help in obtaining information into an investigation where a dead body was discovered September 21st which is later determined to be a homicide. It occurred at 315 Linwood Street, apartment 3F, in the East New York section of Brooklyn. A Miss Deja Johnson, female, 22 years old, was discovered in that apartment deceased. We are looking to identify and question these 5 persons who had access to that apartment. These are people who we believe may have information in regards to this homicide. So if anybody knows them or sees them, if they could please call Crime Stoppers at 1-800-577-TIPS. I'd like to update you on some cases of note. First one is on Sunday, October 2nd, at 1:50 a.m. 2 females, both 19 years of age, while waiting for the Uptown N train at Broadway and West 42nd Street, were assaulted and robbed by at least 9 females wearing matching green nylon jumpsuits. This incident originally stemmed from an apparent bump on the platform and spilled into the subway car. NYPD detectives from the Transit Robbery Squad were able to ID 4 of these persons, all 4 of which reside in the Queensbridge housing development in Queens. Members of the Warrant Division are actively seeking their whereabouts. They are Emily Soto, female, 34 years old, of 4103 Vernon Boulevard, in the Queensbridge houses. She has 2 prior arrests. A Miriam Sissy Esoff, female, 26 years old, of 27th Avenue in Queens, with 1 prior arrest. A Sistani Alston, female, 26, with 3 prior arrests. And a Darina Pagaro, a female, 26 years old, who's also lives in the Queensbridge houses. She has 9 prior arrests. This investigation is still ongoing as to the extent and the identity of others involved. Second case I'd like to talk about occurs on Tuesday, October 4th, at 7 a.m. at 304 Lenox Avenue. A retired New York City police detective who is now employed by the Administration of Children's Services was shot in the chest and shoulder while going to work. He was an unintended victim struck by bullets and caught in a crossfire between rival gang members. Also struck and suffering from a graze wound to his neck was a T-Shawn Harper, male, 21 years old, of 675 Morris Avenue. He has 3 prior arrests. Mr. Harper was arrested on that date, October 4th, of the date of the incident. He was arrested for a criminal sale of controlled substance to an undercover police officer, which he committed prior to this incident, days prior. He also has a misdemeanor menacing and assault for criminal contempt. The investigation reveals that Mr. Harper was walking with 2 as yet to be identified males who were believed to be from the AK houses. When they walked past 304 Lenox Avenue, words are exchanged with 2 males. Shots are exchanged by both groups. A total of 8 9mm shell casings are recovered. We have identified 2 of our shooters and are actively seeking to apprehend them. The first male is a Shaquan Moore, male, 19 years old, of 1439 Amsterdam Avenue, with 1 prior arrest for gambling. Our second male is an Alex Guzman, male, 20 years old, of 15944 Harlem River Drive. He has also 1 prior arrest for grand larceny. Mr. Guzman is also wanted in the September 21st shooting at 540 West 136th Street, where he and another were shooting at a rival gang member and struck another unintended 60-year-old male. The investigation reveals that these shootings are part of the gang violence involving the Manhattan houses, which the gang is called Make It Happen Boys, versus the Grant houses and the AK houses. Any with the information in regards to their whereabouts can call 1-800-577-TIPS. All right. Okay, now? Yeah, after this one? Okay.
Okay, we're gonna take a couple questions. Mall Dining.
Can somebody update us on the 3 separate stabbings in Harlem, in the Bronx, and we have one in Brooklyn last night? And do you have any leads on suspects? And also, were they all random attacks? These were 3-night attacks?
Yep, I'm going to start. So obviously, these are relatively new incidents. They happened yesterday. Investigations by the Detective Bureau are very active and happening as we speak. So I'll start with the one in Harlem because that was the one that was first. So that happened yesterday about 1:05 in the afternoon at 125th Street and St. Nicholas Avenue, where our victim, a male 59, had missed his stop, gets off at 125th Street, and as he's going to get back on the southbound train, he's going up the stairs. There's a male that's sort of blocking his way. He taps him on the shoulder. That leads to a dispute, and that leads to a physical altercation where the victim is then stabbed, has a puncture wound to his shoulder area. The perp then, who's a male, then flees out of the station. Then later in the afternoon, about 10 after 5 p.m. in District 33 out in the 75th Precinct at the Grant and Avenue and Pitkin Station on the A line, we have a male walking in. It's a street level entrance. You walk in and you walks past the booth. As he's approaching the turnstiles, a male comes up behind him and slashes him in the face. That male suspect then runs right back out to the street. He's wearing a red hooded sweatshirt. He gets on a moped or a motorbike and then flees the scene. And then that brings us to last night in the Bronx, a third incident. Definitely a terrible incident where on the Uptown 4 train at 176th Street and Jerome Avenue, our victim, male 38, the doors open, and as people are exiting the train, the victim is set upon by another male who begins to stab him. It leads to a very physical confrontation, a fight on the platform, where the suspect continues to stab the victim. And then he flees the station down to the street and then flees westbound, we believe, towards Davidson Avenue. So our victim in that situation was taken to an area hospital. He was treated, and unfortunately this morning we were alerted that he had passed away about 6 this morning. So obviously, very, very intense investigations are going on now. Chief Essex people are, from the get-go, out there, as they always do, gathering witnesses, getting video, and working the scene with our assistance where we can help. But those were the 3 incidents that you're referring to.
Okay, we'll take Andy Hernandez. You have one.
What's the specific strategy that you guys want to follow with this crime that keeps on growing in the subway? You stated before about patrolling, but it keeps on happening.
So it just goes back to what our original statements were, just an urgent determination to keep our subways safe. Unwavering. We're not going to stop. We're going to be on the trains, uniformed train patrol, platforms. This is what we're going to do. Chief Coy mentioned that we're getting additional subway training unit officers. They're going to be out there on foot, riding the trains, walking the platforms. One of the contexts that we're coming out of a quarter of a summer months from July through September, where we are actually, when you compare transit crime in that quarter to prior quarters pre-pandemic, we were actually down about 9% from 3 years ago, 12% from 4 years ago, and over 16% from 10 years ago. So that's what we were coming out of. But there's the violence that we've seen just in the last few days. I was out at Atlantic Avenue last Friday night where we had a stabbing murder. to the events of yesterday. Very disturbing. We're fully invested in this. We are going to be out there with the riders and for the riders, keeping them safe.
But to your point, we have to do more. I mean, we clearly see that every single day, right? We surged thousands of officers into the subway system since we started the transit safety plan. We need them on platforms. We need them riding the train. We have to deter and prevent this activity, and we have to apprehend the offenders when it happens. So we have to do more, and we will.
We've also added joint response teams, so we have officers down there patrolling on the 4 to 12, the overnight shift, with teams of clinicians, teams of mental health professionals, identifying people who may be in need of services, trying to connect them with services. We have a subway safety task force that works from 12 noon until 4 in the morning. It does very similar work. They engage a lot of people in the system, but as everything that we do, we need the help of New Yorkers. So when they see something like that, they need to call us and let us know so that we can get officers and professionals over there and try to engage people before it becomes problematic.
All right, this will be our last question. Tony DiStefano.
Then Chief LePetri and possibly Commissioner Sewell, the state comes out with statistics recently which essentially indicate that bail reform has accounted for maybe a slight increase in people being rearrested. But from what you recited, Chief LePetri recited about this one shoplifting case, where this person is repeating, are those repeat offenses, even if a person is rearrested only one time, actually swelling your workload and showing that there's a greater proportion of recidivism than the statistics show?
I'll turn it over to Chief LePetri in a moment, but we've held press conferences, stood at podiums, put out data, cited cases of recidivists and what we are facing in this city. I'm not sure how much more we can demonstrate what we are facing in terms of who we are rearresting time after time and what are the drivers of crime in this city. And I'll let Chief LePetri go into his answer, but we have demonstrated time and time again the number of recidivists in this city that are contributing to the greater numbers of crime.
Yeah, and as I started, when we started out, it's a very small number of people that drive crime in this city, just as it's a small number of people that drive violence. So, I mentioned 43 people arrested more than 1,027 times citywide in 2022 for larcenies. We arrested them 1,027 times. They have undoubtedly victimized thousands of New Yorkers. They are responsible for a lot more crime than we have arrested them for. Right? This is the recidivist behavior that's going unchecked.
And we continue to demonstrate that month after month.
All right, thank you everyone for your time.